Johanna from Louisiana, a hoodoo king in every manner, but I've found out without a doubt.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Magic Is This? A show about magic, the occult, the esoteric, the paranormal, the supernatural, and the weird. My name is Douglas Batchelor, and a while ago, I got a bit of a ribbing from some people, from a few folks online. They say, Doug, you're always so excited to talk about whatever topic it is this episode or this week. And I got to admit, I gush enthusiasm about everything that I have on the shows. But guess what, suckers? I am beyond excited to talk about today's topic. I've been waiting to talk about this for at least a year, and I am so thankful that today's topic was picked by the What Magic Is This Patreon patron members. As, yeah, it's something I've been really excited to talk about. And so today, I will be talking about hoodoo. And my guest for today is somebody who knows what they are talking about. She is the author of Rootworker, one of the first modern practical books on hoodoo. She is the creator of the Hoodoo Tarot, a stunningly beautiful and elegant tarot deck. She is a tarot consultant, a cultural anthropologist, researcher of religion, mysticism, the esoteric, and more. Today, we are joined by Tayannah Lee McQuillar. How on earth are you, Tayanna?
I am well. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Things are good where you are. I believe there was a move or something that occurred recently in your life.
Absolutely. I'm from New York City, born and bred, and decided during the pandemic to make this move to North Carolina. And that's where I am now, in a house, and I have a garden and, just living a root worker's life here.
Wonderful. That's fantastic to hear. And I had a couple of people that just said, Doug, if you're going to get into hoodoo, if you're going to talk about hoodoo, you have to talk to Tayanna. And so we're going to make it happen. So let's jump right in. Easy first question, but what is hoodoo?
Voodoo is a culture. In my first book, I referred to it as folk magic. That's a term that is used for a lot of traditions, antiquated traditions, in the opinion of some people. But it is a culture because it informs families, family decisions, beliefs about so many different things, whether it be food or the preparation of food or how to treat people. It really is a culture. And that needs to be really clearly understood. It's not just superstition. And that's what I wanted to clarify for people, that it's not just about spells or just kind of throwing ingredients together and calling it hoodoo. It has a lineage. It has a history. It grows with the times. That's the essence of all culture.
Yeah, okay. Very much so. And it's a somewhat North American phenomenon, is it not?
Absolutely. And that's, because hoodoo that's like interchangeable with voodoo for a lot of people, and it's incorrect.
Yeah.
So voodoo is a religion with a full, hierarchy of priests and set rituals and things of that nature. And hoodoo is, like I said, it is a culture. It is not a religion per se, because a religion, informs you about what happens to you in the afterlife and things like that. Hoodoo doesn't have no specific hoodoo cosmology per se. And hoodoo is also, I should have mentioned, hoodoo is not a term that was used in the Black community here. It was kind of added somehow along the line. Hoodoo is not something that anybody I ever knew used that term in terms of elders. Okay, that's something that came about, I believe, in the 1880s or 1890s. People started talking about hoodoo, and I believe that it came outside of the Black community. It was just a play on the word voodoo. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, and hoodoo has a totally different lineage than voodoo.
Yeah. Very much so. It's one of those things when I mentioned to, of all people, my father is, hey, I'm going to be doing an episode about hoodoo. Of course, voodoo? It's like, hoodoo, Dad. Voodoo? It's like, I said hoodoo. Can you please listen? But what is the term hoodoo itself? Does it come from something? It doesn't come as a playoff of voodoo, but
yes.
It does. Yeah.
Yes, as far as we know, nobody can really say where this word came from. I know it didn't come from Black Americans because, like I said, nobody used that term. We referred to people as root doctors, root workers, conjures. We had a lot of different terms, but that wasn't one of them. The reason I used it is because it's instantly recognizable to the general public.
Right.
Okay. And, unfortunately, a lot of times you have to use kind of misinformation or misunderstood information in order to get people's attention, just because that is what they're used to seeing. So, I'm fine with that. Some people are unhappy with the fact that I called it the Hoodoo Tarot because they know that hoodoo is not a term that was used by Black Americans beforehand. But like I said, I think it gets to the point everybody knows kind of what's going on, even if they don't really understand what the difference between hoodoo and voodoo is. And Vodun, which is where the word voodoo comes from, is a religious practice primarily in the Caribbean, of course, in Africa, and in Louisiana, Mississippi area. But other than that, and it's very Catholic. Okay, that's the difference between voodoo and hoodoo. Hoodoo comes from the Protestant, is informed by Protestantism because the Europeans that came here were, for the most part, Protestant. Okay, so that's where it's informed by Protestantism. So you won't have all of these practices that you see in voodoo because voodoo is informed by Catholic European Spaniards and Portuguese, right? And French. So, it's a totally different energy. And also the history of the locations where these practices traveled or where they came from informs the practice. It has to, okay? So there are going to be different ethnic groups that traveled to the Caribbean, European ethnic groups, Indigenous people, and African people. They're all going to be of a different mix than you will have in North America because we're informed by the land itself, the people that dwelled on the land, and people that came to settle, invade, or however you want to view that, the land. Okay.
Absolutely. A couple of words that you used earlier, root work and conjure. What are these referring to specifically?
Well, root work refers to the roots of plants. Okay, so a lot of the remedies, or majority of the remedies that were used to heal people, the foundation of it were these roots from different plants. Okay, tonics that were made, a lot of teas. Okay, that was like the primary use of so many of these herbs is the use of teas, washes, and tonics. So that is where root work comes from, the knowledge of what to do with these roots and how to apply them for healing. It could be for exoteric purposes or esoteric purposes. So that's where that comes from. And conjure is it just means calling upon spirits. Okay. Since hoodoo is not a religion, there are no hoodoo gods. There are voodoo gods, right? Or voodoo deities. But there are no hoodoo deities. Hoodoo practitioners tend to work with the spirits of their ancestors or the spirits of spiritual guides, people that are maybe not necessarily ancestors, but spirits nonetheless that, want to aid and help them. So conjuring is the calling upon of these ancestors or spiritual guides.
Amazing. So before we even start on the history of hoodoo itself, what context would you like people to understand about the circumstances, the times, and the place from where hoodoo started to form, or what we're going to call hoodoo when it started to form?
Okay, so you have the indigenous people of North America, specifically hoodoo is primarily a Southern tradition. And like I stated in my book, The Hoodoo Tarot, there were thousands upon thousands of ethnic groups that existed in the Southern United States. A lot of these groups, they say, are extinct. They're not. Some groups are just not federally recognized. And others had to join confederations in order to survive. So if you have maybe 300 tribal members, you'd have to, for survival, if you're being invaded by the Spanish from the West and then the British or whoever from the West, and you get the point. There's strength in numbers. You're going to have to join up with people with more members. You join the Cherokees or you join the Creeks or something who may have 2,000 members as opposed to 300. So each one of these ethnic groups had their own beliefs. There is no kind of one belief. There's no mono belief that American Indians had. Everybody had their own language, culture, and traditions. Now, they may have been strikingly similar, and many people spoke each other's language, especially tribes in the immediate area. People are multilingual here. So you start off with this foundation of culture, of religion, and I say religion or spirituality rather. So that is here. That's already here. Okay, so then when you have immigration or invasion from other places, everybody's working together now. Okay, so what we call Voodoo began with the historical circumstances of people from primarily Western Europe migrating here by choice or by force, Africans migrating here by choice or by force, and then you have the indigenous people who were already here, and they're going to share ideas. Okay, they're sharing beds, and I speak about that in my book. It's not a lot of discussion about how freely people intermarried here. There were no laws against race mixing until much later. So for the first 200 years or so, you have a lot of race mixing. And if anybody out there has ever had a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whoever from another race or ethnic group, you already know what happens. You share recipes, right? You share ideas. Hey, let me meet your father. And everybody shares. Okay. So conquest, commerce, and coitus is how traditions, from the beginning of time have, kind of spread among human populations. And that's how Voodoo began, with the meeting of these three cultures. And of course, there were other people as well, but I'm talking about the three foundational cultures that make up what we call Voodoo today.
That's awesome. I love the way that you put that. That's great stuff. So
I don't want to get nasty, Douglas.
No, it's all good. But it makes sense. And guess what? It's going to stick in people's minds. A little bit of alliteration is good for everything.
That's right.
For something as varied and widespread as the elements from which Hoodoo sprung up, and this might be asking a lot, but what do you kind of see as the origin of Hoodoo? Was it just what you talked about, those three C's? Or is there a moment that you see as when something discernibly like what we would recognize as Hoodoo appeared?
I think it depends on what you're looking at, okay? Because the foundation is herbalism. Right? That's why it's called root work. So plants, right, are the foundation of everything. When Europeans and Africans came here, they didn't know what the hell was going on with these plants because it's not their home. Okay. So that's why you had a lot of settlers and stuff dying, you're sniffing this and take a bite, I'm dead. Okay. So that is the foundation, is indigenous knowledge. That is it, because like I said, these are settlers and immigrants and people that have no idea how these things were. And animals also, we use a lot of animal materials. These were frightening, new, strange creatures to foreigners here. The beginning is with the land. It's all about working with the land, the spirits of the land. I guess what the beginning, if you want to call it that, would be when these three people started to share spiritual ideas, which I guess would be with the introduction of Christianity to indigenous people and African people. And there had to be some kind of new language spoken, okay, by choice and by force, okay? So I think that would be the beginning, because Hoodoo is what's central to Hoodoo. Again, like I said, it's herbalism, but it's also Christianity. And a lot of people don't want to hear that nowadays because they may have gripes about, organized religion or whatever. But as far as my understanding, that is the foundation, is the belief in the Holy Spirit. And that's what makes it sanctified. That's what makes it right. Okay. Because the Holy Spirit is something that Black churches have been known, to really emphasize more than any other ethnic group. That's why, at Black churches, you'll see a lot of what they call emotionalism. Okay, so lots of screaming, lots of shouting, running around, people are speaking in tongues, It's that connection with that spirit, because it's the spirit of creation. It's the spirit of God in creation. So even more so than anything else, Rootworkers emphasize the Holy Spirit because it permeates everything. So for you Star Wars fans out there, it's just the Force, right? That's it. And there have been different terms. Every ethnic group has a different term for these things. Like I said, there are so many different ethnic groups that combine their knowledge that, everybody had their own idea, but the concept of the Force is, is ancient.
Love it. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I like that idea. Yeah, if you do have the origin, it's the three groups mixing, and then the adoption in some way of Christianity, or as you say, the Holy Spirit. Yeah. One thing that you make very clear in the Hoodoo Tarot, and I love this, is that you say that there is no separating African American history from Indigenous history. Things such as reading bones for divination that existed in Indigenous culture before African Americans arrived. I'm wondering if you can elucidate a little bit more on this.
Okay, so Indigenous people are not a monolithic group, like I said. You have so many practices here that have been here since time immemorial, but because people are just, the school system in general just doesn't educate people on Indigenous American history at all. Okay, you kind of get, the most education people get is like, Hollywood pictures. And then that's only, that's not very reliable, right? So there is no separation, because the first people enslaved in America, on the American continent, and definitely in North America, were Indigenous people. Okay, you see a million slave movies or movies that take place during that time. You don't see any Indigenous people or any people from India or any people from Papua New Guinea. There were all kinds of ethnic groups of quote unquote Black people, aka dark-skinned, broad-featured people that were on these plantations. So there is no separating, because those people are the ancestors of so-called African Americans today. Okay, so and most of the people on these plantations, they were women. Okay, depending on the time period in the state, but definitely at places like Virginia, tobacco plantations. I have ancestors on these plantations, and they were Indigenous women. Okay. There is no separating the food, the herbalism. I actually have a quote from a very important lady named Mrs. Handy, who talked about these Negro women, how they know almost everything there is to know about these Indigenous plants. How? It's because these were our grandmothers. And many Black Americans, they may not admit it nowadays because it's not fashionable. Most of us that I've spoken to, they have an oral history of having Indigenous ancestors. Okay, including my grandmother told me my heritage when I was 6 years old. Okay, so I've known that. She just told me in school they're going to lie about who I am, and they're going to lie about our culture and all this stuff, but I'm telling you who you are. Okay, so at any rate, that's why there's no separating the food that we call soul food. A lot of it is Indigenous, grits, eating innards, gizzards, and all that kind of stuff. People say that's slave food. I just want to know where, because there is a big article called Guts and Grease, the diet of Native Americans. This is long before the chattel slavery. So again, these are our ancestors, our bloodline lineage here in this soil. Okay. So naturally, your grandmother is going to pass down remedies and beliefs and things of that nature. So that's why I say there is no separation, because we were on those plantations together. We fought together. There were also American Indian slave owners. There were also African American slave owners. Okay, we just share an entire experience. There were a lot of marriages, and also because of racial integrity laws, a lot of Indigenous people were reclassified as African, Negro, or colored, because we learned in school that most Indians died from smallpox. They did not. Most Indians died by the pen, not the sword, but not smallpox. Okay, they were just simply, it was paper genocide. That's what happened.
Damn.
Yeah.
I think you've demystified a lot of things, and I really hope that blows everybody's minds.
Yeah, please check out my Instagram because I have documented my own genealogy journey. I've been on that journey for 3 years, and I have documented several ancestors on my maternal line that were reclassified Indigenous people that were reclassified as Negro, Black, or colored.
That's incredible. Yeah. So something that you did bring up was this idea of lineage. Are you able to tell us what lineage means for you?
Well, Hoodoo or root work is a lineage-based tradition. It's not going to look the same. People didn't just talk about it, right? That's a very contemporary phenomenon for people just to talk about hoodoo. In fact, when my first book came out, nobody was talking about hoodoo before root work, and that's just the truth.
Yeah.
Okay, not in contemporary times. And I had family members that were pissed. I got angry letters from Black people all over. Why are you airing our dirty laundry? This is not for white folks to know anything about. You are messing things up. I still get angry, messages from people. Okay?
Seriously?
Absolutely, because for Africans and Indigenous people, if you were discovered practicing your culture, that could mean death. Okay, so people got used to, keeping it on the low. Okay, because you could get run out of town, and death is probably the easiest. What about exile? What about people not wanting to do business with you? It was social or physical death to be caught practicing your culture or even speaking your language, depending on where you were located. So I understand that every family is going to practice root work differently. Now, there may be some general ideas. Okay, like I said about ancestors or spiritual work and plant knowledge, because mint is mint,
Right.
Sunflower is sunflower. Now, the exoteric side of it, the magic, if you will, that's going to be different depending on the ethnic makeup of your family. So if your ancestor was Cherokee and Yoruba, and your grandfather was from Scotland, right? That's going to be a totally different energy than if your mother was Akan or Igbo, right? And your father was, I don't know, Iroquois, and then your grandfather was British. You know what I mean? Because all the the European ethnic groups have their own spiritual beliefs. They have their own ideas of herbalism and definitions for things, even if they didn't know what the herbs were, it's just natural for people to say, oh, okay, well, I've never seen that before, but it reminds me of what we had on the countryside back in London, whatever, you know what I'm saying? That's what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I mean by lineage. What I mean by hoodoo lineage, that is specific to a person's family line. Right. Certain practices that they have in the family. Now, hoodoo as a community is a North American phenomenon because of the very specific history of the United States, which is like no other, and no other history. Every nation has a very distinct and unique history.
Right. At one point, I think in the Hoodoo Tarot, you just bring up that the premier North American magical tradition might as well be hoodoo. I did an episode more than a year ago about New Thought, and I said in that episode, North America's esoteric contribution to the world, the greatest esoteric contribution to the world. And as soon as I released that episode, I was like, fuck. I completely negated hoodoo. Anyways, it's unbelievable. But yeah, I think people, when they hear this idea of lineage, they immediately think that it's something that is this long chain through history. Is that an appropriate way to think about it? Is just your ancestors and your ancestors' ancestors?
Like I said, there's two different ways to think about it. Like, right. I have my own lineage. My great grandmother is not your great grandmother, or else we would be part of the same lineage. You know what I mean? Right. So it's a micro and a macro concept as far as I'm concerned. Hoodoo is a lineage of North America. It's a North American phenomenon. It could not have been born anywhere else on the planet but here because of the specific historical events that happened here.
Right.
And then you have the micro, which is your family. And that is where Hoodoo is informed by the family. That's why I structured the deck after the family. There are no bishops, here. There are no knights here, or there never were,
Right.
So it's focused on the family structure, and both African and Indigenous people placed a very big stake on family. Everything was about the family and the extended family. That's why it's organized that way. Mother, father, daughter, son, the elders are the major arcana. The community are the minor arcana. That's what it's about. It's about your family.
Wonderful. I have to
Mhm.
ask, what role did root workers or conjure men and conjure women, what role did they serve in their communities? Was it everything? Was it just they had to be everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you have, again, a lot of this is informed by the spirit of the land, the people that were already here as well. So you have medicine people, medicine man, medicine woman. And some people even refer to root work or root working as medicine. Okay. Why? Because this is America. Okay. So your medicine man, your medicine woman is going to be a therapist, an herbalist, a counselor, a midwife, an administrator of justice. They're all of these things. Musicians, right? So the root worker plays the same exact role of therapist, herbalist, counselor, midwife, administrator of justice. There is no difference in that way. So that is the role that root workers have played. Now, of course, depending on every person's personality, some may emphasize the therapy aspect more than the counseling aspect. Some people never touched a newborn baby in their whole lives. Okay.
Right.
It really does depend on what you're good at. And then there are some people that were only button people, let's put it that way, to use mafia terminology, administrators of justice, I call them. Okay. So, as I said in the book, a lot of times Black Americans were discriminated against. So the only, justice by, using the system, just was like, what's the point of even trying? We rarely got justice when bad things happen to our community. So, you went to a root worker that was known to be competent in getting retribution for these injustices. And that also existed in Africa, and that also existed here. Like, a lot of people don't understand, Indigenous people of North America had people that administered justice. It's just, this kind of noble savage that they were just sitting around playing pipes and praying to the Great Spirit and eating corn. It's really insulting. Everybody that existed out there existed here. Okay. So you had war chiefs, and the war chiefs needed a war medicine person, right? Somebody that was prepared to do damage spiritually to enemies if necessary. Okay. So all of these things were the job or possible, majors
Right.
for certain people. Like, my cousin is in the Hoodoo Tarot deck. She was an administrator of justice. Her name was Miss Robinson. Her name was Emma Robinson. Yes. So she was known as one of those people to go to. She was actually an all-purpose root worker. She did herbal cures and things like that. But she was also known, and her brother only did retribution work. He was amazing at that. He didn't want to be in the deck, though. I asked permission, and he's like, no way.
That story of Miss Robinson's amazing.
And it's funny because Caitlin did such a wonderful job. My grandmother passed away. I think she saw 6 of the cards before she passed. But one of the first I had to make sure was Miss Robinson, because she knew her. She passed, I think Miss Robinson, she passed when my grandmother was 9 years old. But my grandmother said, I will remember her till forever, because she was such a powerful character. So I had her describe her to a T. And when she finally saw the card, my grandmother almost dropped her cup. She said, I don't know how this lady got in my head. She said, that is our cousin. Through and through. It's like, she's like almost like a photograph. She was so impressed by Caitlin's artwork. So yeah. Oh, and I also wanted to make another point about lineage really quickly. There's
Absolutely.
a card in the deck, Gullah Jack. He was an enslaved African, and he started a slave revolt. Okay. He was very big on lineage. Okay. He only wanted participants Okay, enslaved people that were from his ethnicity. Okay, because he wanted that the magic that he was employing to be powerful, and I guess I'm assuming, I don't know, for everybody to be on the same page.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's the importance of lineage. I just want to give you another example.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Something that you made very clear in Hoodoo Tarot is the book that accompanies it, is that for a lot of people, I mean, particularly Black Americans, they don't have access to doctors. And a lot of white people and Indigenous people did not have access to doctors. So a lot of root workers, that was your doctor. That was the person you had to go to.
Well, I know that's the narrative. Yeah, that is true. But to be honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
from what I've heard from my grandmother, Black people didn't want to go to white doctors. They were butchering people. More people died from the white doctor because they didn't know what they were doing. Okay, I post all the time on Instagram the admission in these fancy journals at the time. How would Negroes have access to these journals? Even most white people couldn't read these fancy academic and herbal journals and all this kind of stuff, but we have access to them now, and they admit in them that they took the information from us. Okay, they renamed it,
Right.
put their faces on it, and that became the remedies. Okay, so the kind of idea that Black people are just wishing they could go to white doctors, I don't know who started it, but you know, with our remedies were highly effective, as they stated in their journals. But they just told us that we were savages and that what we were doing were backwards. But then on the low, they were going behind our backs and studying these things and putting their faces and their names on it. So,
motherfuckers,
yeah.
that's just what they do. What the fuck?
Yeah, that's really what happened. Now, I'm not saying that all Black people felt like that, but you know, my grandmother, she just debunked a whole lot of stuff for me. And you know, she had we have an amazing oral history in my family, so she was just like, you know, I talked to other people. My grandmother knew enslaved people. That's why, you know, people don't understand. This wasn't a long time ago. Okay, her best friend was 105 at the time, Miss Williams. Okay. And Mrs. Williams remembers her grandmother because she just happens to have a family that everybody lives to be 100. Okay. Right. So think about it. She knew her grandmother, and Mrs. Williams was born, I believe, in 1910, 1900, something like that. So she knew her grandmother. Do the math.
Yeah.
Okay. So her mother was 100 years old when she passed in 1980. Okay. So that means she must have been born in 1880. Okay, so her mother, do the math.
Right.
So I have a lot of I have hundreds of years of information, oral information from people, and the stuff that I'm reading in books doesn't match what I'm hearing from actual people.
Right.
Huh. And what I'm finding academically, like I said, it's not just the opinion of my grandmother and her old cronies. I'm actually showing people on Instagram for the sources, because now we have access to these journals, and they never expected somebody like me to ever read them. So they're just giving it all up. Yep, we stole from the Negroes. Jeez. Yep, we told them that they were full of shit, and we're using the information.
Damn, that's insane.
Yep.
Well, I hope that is registered by a lot of people listening to this, because that's insane.
Yeah.
Man, are there regional differences in hoodoo? Like, is hoodoo from, say, Memphis vastly different than, say, hoodoo from Louisiana? Like, is there regional stuff that one should know about hoodoo?
Well, I definitely. Funny you mentioned Louisiana. Louisiana, you know, is heavily Catholic,
right? So
it's going to have a lot of different flavors. It has a totally different flavor in Catholic areas, in my opinion, because, you know, there are rituals that are done in the Catholic Church that just don't exist. That's why, you know, in a Protestant church, that's why, you know, burning candles and all that stuff. Nobody was doing all that stuff, you know, over here, because it wasn't a part of our spiritual reality to burn candles and things like that. That's how you know somebody has been influenced by Catholicism. Now, you had butter lamps and things like that, maybe to heat things up, but you didn't have this kind of heavy usage of candles. and also certain prayers, right? So you'll have Hail Marys and other things that you may find in voodoo and in hoodoo in Louisiana. People, again, it's based on the family. So that person's grandmother was probably Catholic or great grandmother. So they're going to pass down what works for their lineage, what works for their family. So yes, regional differences are a thing. Mm-hmm.
You did bring up the Catholic side of it, and as far as my knowledge, Voodoo that is mainly Catholic, or at least Louisiana Voodoo, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you said earlier at the very beginning of the show, you said that Hoodoo is far more Protestant. Is that mainly just because of that strange mixing pot where the French, as they came down, the Acadians, as they came down from Canada in some instances, that brought their Catholic roots. Is there a reason why you think that Hoodoo is far more predominantly Protestant?
Because a lot of the colonists were Protestant.
Yeah.
And it's really just that simple. And those are the people that were creating policies and setting up missionary schools. And, they were the ones preaching the gospel. Okay. So that's how people were, became heavily Protestant. It's just how it worked out. You know what I mean? And people took what they could, and that just happens with any group. If people are put upon all of a sudden, there are new policies put in place. Okay, you work with it. You know what I mean, and you try to find common denominators. So, God was, it's fine. There has always been an understanding among most indigenous people I've ever studied of a universal soul, of a universal spirit, blessing us all, cursing us all, whatever. And I guess that kind of thing depends on the ethnic group in question, wherever we're talking about, or whatever people around the world. But that generally is an understanding that indigenous people here had. Now, the concept of a great spirit is definitely propagated by missionaries, to get indigenous people to get on board, with what they were teaching. But this kind of understanding of the force, that's everywhere. I've not encountered a culture yet that didn't have this understanding that we exist in such a profound universe, whether they call it universe or not, but this understanding that we're connected to something very, very powerful. We're very, very powerful in turn, and have responsibilities to this power, or maybe as a proxy for animals or whatever. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what it's all about.
Love it. It's fantastic. One of the things that I think a lot of people know, if they know even like a very small amount or a cursory amount about Hoodoo, is our ancestors. Why do you think that ancestors and the dead play such a huge role in Hoodoo?
Well, the indigenous Americans practiced ancestor veneration, as did most of the African ethnic groups that came here. Ancestor worship was considered devil worship to Christians. So that kind of got suppressed, but people never stopped honoring their ancestors, even if they couldn't do it in the form of an elaborate ritual anymore, right? So that's why it plays a role, because it's part of the lineage. It's part of the lineage of the people in the tradition. If you are an African descended person, or if you're an indigenous descended person, this is something that has literally been in your family prior to these recent events of colonialism. It's very recent. It's just, people don't realize, like, you're like only like 6 ancestors away from those ships, whatever those ships were, whether they brought people from Europe or Africa by choice or by force. And I do make that point as well, that there are many, many Europeans that were brought here, including some of my ancestors that I found in my genealogy research, especially the Scottish ones. They didn't come here by choice. They were fighting British oppression. And when they lost a couple of battles, like the Battle of Culloden, a lot of people were sent here as punishment because they were considered savage or whatever. So there's just so much history here. Yeah. And it's about your family. It's about your lineage and how that informs everything, because it does. And finding them is such a rewarding experience. And I consider it an ancestor offering. doing genealogy research, because recovering stories from the past is, I mean, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't mind somebody like chanting my name, you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, you did good work. You did the best you could for yourself, for your family. You deserve that honor. And so you have these cultures that believe that. And that's why it's still important to honor one's ancestors. Now, how it's done, again, well, that would be informed by, things that happened later. Some areas were repressed or, suppressed more than others. So it depends. So that will look different depending on what happened. But I noticed that nowadays, there's kind of a uniformity going on with how ancestor veneration is done, especially among Black people, whether they be Black Americans or not. But I think that's just the phenomenon of the internet. But anyway, I digress.
Put some candles out, pictures of people, have a boveda, blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of like that.
Yeah. And it's, and it doesn't mean that's one expression from, but if there are many different ways to, like, my ancestor veneration room, my hoodoo room looks nothing like that, and that's, it reflects my actual factual lineage, and I'm proud of it. But people can do whatever they want. I just try to let them know that is no one way to do it. It's as unique as each and every one of us.
It's amazing. I love it. And I agree entirely. One of the most important aspects of hoodoo is the medicinal and herbal / botanical knowledge. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but could you say that the plant knowledge is perhaps the most overlooked aspect of hoodoo these days? Is that kind of like people kind of consider it like, it's not the most important thing? And would you say that, by the way, no, yes, it is?
I'm confused. It's called root work for a reason. You kind of have to know the plants, but I think that mass production, it has to do with consumerism. I think it has more to do with it than anything. Again, you have people just following each other. Okay. So like there are certain herbs that are just like flavor of the month right now, sage, Palo Santo, and, like there are just a couple of greatest hits going around and everybody's just doing that. So those are the essential herbs now,
Right.
But hoodoo proper or traditionally, you have to know the plants in your area, in your region, right? Because that's going to help you. Again, it's about being informed by the land itself. Not necessarily, and I'm not attacking, dried herbs or things that people do, but that's what it was all about. It was about being informed by the land, allowing the land and the energy of the land and the plants and animals that you lived and worked and were buried with, okay, to heal and help you. So how is it not important when that is the essence of it itself? Is getting to know your area, getting to know the plants and what can help you and your family in your area. So that is absolutely important. I'm just learning as well. I mean, I grew up in New York City. My grandmother was a master, but she grew up on raising, animals and, having a garden and stuff. And I spoke about this a couple of times in interviews and on Instagram. My grandmother would go through Central Park and she would know exactly what these plants were. But she would look at the names and, they would be like complicated Latin terms. And she's just like, what? That's nothing but bushweed, And then she would people would gather around my grandmother. And I remember this one lady, she said, do you have a degree in botany? My grandmother's like, what the hell is that? I don't even know what you said. So no, she just knew because that was necessary. Okay, to know what was going on. So it's absolutely essential if you want to learn from your environment or what should be in your environment. I know a lot of places are paved over, but try and learn about the plants and animals in your environment. That will be of great use.
Absolutely. 100%. I got an email from somebody who was living in a rural area, and he was like, "What's the best magical advice you can give somebody for beginning who lives in a rural area?" And I said, "Try learning about the plants and stuff in your neck of the woods." And he never emailed me back. I don't know if he took the advice or not. It's just like,
it wasn't sexy enough, Douglas.
Oh man, it's like, you have to draw a circle on the floor, get yourself a skull, a couple of red candles.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
like, no, man, just
production, man.
Just go out, look at some herbs, learn about them, learn what you can do. That's.
But it's just not. It's not sexy enough. And remember, people are going by years and years of fantasy movies and things, and they want things to be a big deal that are just not. But it is a big deal. Like I said, I just moved here from New York, so I got to know what was in Central Park and maybe Hudson River Park.
Right.
But I have to get reintroduced to so many different species. I mean, of course, there were some just from oral history, and I knew what was going on, but there are so many. And I decided to start growing native flowers and native plants because it helps the whole environment. People don't realize that. It really is important to plant native because they're the ecosystem, it's a benefit for everyone to do so. So that's where the root work starts. It's not the skulls and the flash and I mean, all that stuff is, and I like crops. Don't get me wrong, Douglas. I really do. I like stuff, but you shouldn't need it. You should not need it at all. Okay. It's really, what would happen if the government decided, enough of this spiritual shit. We want all of you to take down your altars. We're going to collect all tarot decks. We're getting rid of all of it. If any of you are caught doing it, you're going to be in prison or fined $20,000. A lot of people out here that feel so aligned and connected, Douglas, they would realize they ain't shit because they relied on too much stuff.
Yeah.
They're just paying attention to the sizzle, not the steak. The foundation is the plant. The foundation is the stone. The foundation is the animal.
Yeah.
And you, most importantly. And I think that, but naturally, because we live in this, consumerist culture, people want for $19.95, you can be a master too, and it's just not fun to hear, hey, you got to study and you have to learn, slowly. Yeah. It's not sexy. People don't want to do it.
It's coming back a bit. I think understandings about animism and animism's the big word that when it goes off, everybody goes crazy. But I mean, done properly, I think that people are now starting to be like, oh yeah, you know what? I probably should, even if I live in an urban area, I probably should know some of the stuff that's around here. Imagine that. But
yeah, and you can always purchase. I mean, we live in a time you can order any damn thing over the internet. Just order a few plants and get to know them one by one. It doesn't have, you don't have to, have like this kind of Gargamel fantasy. Just relax.
Preaching to the choir here. Preaching to the choir. I love it. A couple of things that locations that people equates to hoodoo would be graveyards and crossroads. Can you speak a little bit as to why these two areas are somewhat important to hoodoo?
Okay, so ancestors in graveyards, right? You have to think about graveyards are not what graveyards are today in terms of hoodoo. Most people were buried on their family's land. Right. Okay, for the most part, you weren't buried next to strangers and strangers on top of grandma. Okay, everybody usually was buried together. Okay, so working in the graveyard was really just ancestor veneration and, working with people that came before you, getting their insight or the potency of the earth, because, right. Okay, let me just slow down. So embalming is something that was not popular until after Abraham Lincoln died. Okay. Before that, people just were buried. Okay. That's why you had funerals, in people's home. People were born at home. They had their wakes, what we call a wake at home. Okay. And that's why you had to hurry up and wrap up these services because the body would begin to smell. My grandmother was born at home. Her little brother, his funeral was where? In the living room. Okay. This is not that long ago. Okay. So people were just more familiar with death, just in general. My grandmother said, you want chicken for dinner? Go out and kill it. and bring it back in the house. Okay.
Right.
You want sweet potatoes, go in and pick it. Okay. You were just closer to the beginning and the end more. Our great grandparents, I don't care where they were on the planet, unless they were super duper rich, okay, and they lived in some kind of ivory tower, they had their hands in some kind of dirt and they had to kill something to eat. Okay. So at any rate, so that's where the graveyard, working in graveyards, you worked with your relatives. And then when people, started to be buried with strangers or whatever, now you're just working in graveyards for the energy, just the energy of a grave. First of all, it's quiet, it's discreet. And like I said, with so much persecution going on, you really need to be careful about where you're doing things, especially if you need to bury something or whatever. You just have to take precautions. So it depends on the situation. So it's ancestor veneration, it's privacy, it's quiet, it's a place to reflect. So that's my explanation for why people work in graveyards and cemeteries, or maybe to harness spirits. Maybe there are certain spirits that, that they feel like would be good to work with or easy to work with. That's one. And as far as crossroads, now crossroads have been a special place for thousands and thousands of years all over the world. You have lore and beliefs related to crossroads. Why? Because it's a place. It's a place where all points intersect. Okay, so just symbolically speaking, it's a place where you made decisions, right? Because if you're at the center of the crossroads, right, you could go north, south, east, west,
anywhere.
Okay, you could go any direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a powerful thing. So like I said, it's worldwide. If you do research on ancient Greece, you'll find it. Hermes was the guardian of the crossroads. And then in medieval Europe, you had people that committed suicide were often buried at crossroads, and people that were executed. Okay, so, be careful if you go on a trip to, really rural areas in Europe, and you're at a crossroads, you just dig around, you might see a body, okay? Because it was considered a powerful point. And also to keep people that were in medieval times in Europe, that's what they did it for, because those spirits were considered damned or cursed, right? But because of the power of this, I'm in the center of this. I am empowered because I'm in the center. So that's a wonderful place to do work symbolically, right? And also it was a place that a lot of what people call Black magic was done. Okay, so that was a belief that arrived here as well from all over the world. Okay, so Africans had a concept of crossroads and the power of crossroads, and certain deities were associated with crossroads, like Legba in Voodoo. And then you had the Europeans that came here. They brought their own beliefs about the power of the crossroads, and Indigenous people have the medicine wheel and the power of the cross. That's why a lot of settlers believed that maybe this was that American Indians were, some kind of lost Christian tribe, because they saw crosses painted on their foreheads and stuff. But it just symbolized the cross, the crossroad, the cross, the medicine wheel. Okay, so this is just universal. That's why. So again, you have all these three cultures, and all three are informed, have some kind of information about crossroads. Of course, it's going to be in Voodoo, because all three cultures have lore associated with crossroads.
Nice. Love it. Because of the vastness of Voodoo, we don't really have time to talk about every single one of the aspects or practices. What, in your opinion, are some of the more important aspects, the ones which you think are somewhat distinct and that people would go like, yeah, that's Voodoo? It's like bottle trees. What to you makes up the most distinct aspects of Voodoo?
That's such a tough question, because, like I said, it's so much based on your individual families and the oral history of your family. However, what I don't really know how to answer that question, Douglas, because of what my understanding of what Voodoo is, but definitely this concept of continuity, the power in the family, because we're people that come from Voodoo lineages or that haven't, I guess, adopted a negative attitude towards it. They're very, very proud of the information. They're very proud of the service that was done for the community, because like I said, they played so many different roles. Okay. I think that the common thread is this appreciation for one's family lineage, appreciation for, if not the church itself, but the spirit of the church, the positive aspects. I'm not talking about the hierarchy and the scandals and that kind of thing, but for Black Americans, the church was everything. It was a place. It was everything, because you didn't have access to every space, to other spaces. So that was your community center. That was your temple. That was a place to to meet new people. That was your love connection. Like, that was everything. You know what I mean? So like this kind of love and appreciation for community and the spirit of the community, I think that's the only thing I can think of without I don't know, being negative towards people that have a different way of expressing hoodoo, which may be different. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. No, I think that's a wonderfully profound answer, actually. Like, most people would be like, oh, you want to talk about reading bones or stuff like that. But I love your answer. It's the sense of community and the sense of lineage. That's most magical traditions don't have any of that. Very few of them do. At least Europeans, very little of that. I mean, we can talk about like grimoire tradition. There's a Solomonic tradition. We never had anything like that. So,
well, maybe it's is it a mega, like you have mega ancestors, or
right.
Like Moses, and because there are mega ancestors in root work. Moses, I mentioned Moses for that reason, because Moses is considered like the ultimate root worker.
Right.
It was considered the ultimate root work. I mean, the dude, he had a snake rod, he's parting seas. He has it going on. Okay.
Right.
And Jesus was considered a really potent root worker. He's turning water into wine. He has it. There are some really good root workers in the Bible. Maybe, I don't know. I'm assuming that's what it is. If there's no direct lineage, then what people do, or if people don't know their direct lineage, they just kind of adopt these meta ancestors. So you see I see a lot of like Black Americans, for example. A lot of people haven't done their genealogy or don't have their oral history, a strong oral history, and don't really know who their actual, factual, tangible bloodline ancestors are. So they adopt Nefertiti, they adopt Shaka Zulu, or whoever. You know what I mean? To kind of proxy.
Right.
Proxy ancestors or whatever. But hoodoo is really a beautiful tradition, in that many ancestors, do what you want, but it's really about your grandmother, your grandfather, your great-grandmother, your great-grandfather. These people were incredibly smart. And I keep telling people, like, it doesn't matter if somebody went to school. I know a lot and have met a lot of people over the years that had PhDs, MAs, ABCDFGs, and they were dumb as a pail of nails, So, and my grandma had, I think her highest level of education was 7th grade, I believe. And she was incredibly smart. So, it's really about the person. That would be my answer. But as far as these like practices, like carrying John the Conqueror root and throwing bones, yes, those are common elements. Right. But it's really for me it's always about the essence of a thing. We get caught up in so much stuff and forget what is the heartbeat. What is the heartbeat? What is keeping this thing going? And that's why a lot of hoodoo traditions, or people with ancestors that practice hoodoo, well, I don't understand why our family stopped, practicing hoodoo, because, I have a whole history that they did. If they were to really think about it, a lot of times it's because the family fell apart. You know, the Great Migration, so-called Great Migration, a lot of Black Americans left the South or ran out of the South, and they migrated to, you know, the East, the West Coast, to escape these conditions. And a lot of their traditions began to fall apart as the family, you know, the family was separated. And also because it maybe in new, you know, environments, you were considered, you know, kind of backwards in country. That happened to a lot of my relatives. And that's why a lot of them were angry when I wrote Rootwork, because it was like, this is so embarrassing. It's so bumpkin. It's so country. It's over. Like, you know, it's embarrassing to us, you know? So all these beliefs, so again, it's just a separation from the lineage that usually causes this kind of erosion and then eventual dissolution, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because I did speak to the descendant of Dr. Buzzard when I created the book.
Really?
I asked her directly, like, how she felt about this, I don't know what people are calling a reclamation of this tradition. And she's just like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't approve of this at all. And yeah, and you know, and I just at first I was just stunned, and she said, you know, the desire is not enough. Just because you want to do something doesn't mean you can. And she has several children, and even though they are Dr. Buzzard's descendants, she said none of them have it. Okay. So, you know, it's not enough just to want to do something. She said some of these traditions were meant to die. I said, well, you don't feel bad that she's the last one in a long line of root workers. Okay. Her, you know, Dr. Buzzard just happened to be the famous one in the family, but her family has been doing this for centuries. I said, are you sad that it's dying with you? She said, hell no. It's a job of service. We have served the community for a long time. It's over. She really believes that. It's over. Some of these people have these lineages. They die for a reason. It's time for them to rest. Okay. So she said, but I'm going to be honest about what she said. She said, but you're going on with white folks just because you want to do it. You feel like you have a right to do it just because you're Black, or just because of whatever. It's not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be called to it, born into it. Okay. Because there are signs that you were supposed to be a root worker. It wasn't just, you know, you're Black and you're Southern, so you could be a root worker. What?
Right.
Well, that's not how it was. That's how it's becoming. Okay. But it's not the way it was. And she said that her family is done and she's happy with the service they've provided. And that's that. And it made me think for a long time, Douglas. And I thought, well, wow, that's deep. Okay. And, you know, so, you know, if anything, I just would recommend that people do divination on if they should get involved. Because maybe, like this elder said, because she was very old when I spoke to her. I don't know if she's still around. Okay. She was at peace. Okay, so maybe that doesn't apply only to hoodoo. Maybe a lot of people are reading up, read this and read that have no business. Maybe the ancestors are tired. Okay, but they don't bother asking because they're starving. And they don't know any other way to get fed. And this is the cultural conversation right now. It's very trendy. And that's why I'm telling people, stop following these trends, because it may not be for you. You know what I mean? Everything is not for everybody. And it doesn't mean it's disrespecting the tradition. The tradition and the energy will still be in your family. But you just will not be servicing. Maybe, you know, and a lot of root workers didn't do that as well. I should make that clear. Root workers didn't only work for the community. There were some people that just worked for their family. You know what I mean? I was reading tarot cards like that. I've been reading tarot cards since 1996, Douglas.
Nice.
You know, but I just started reading for the public about 10 years ago. First, I wanted to master my craft. I'm old school. So I wasn't going to hang out my shingle after reading a few books. That's not my style. I waited almost 20 years before I put myself out there. You know, so, so there are people like that. I only read for my friends and my family, and that's it. So that's my perspective on these things.
That's You have just chucked a wonderful amount of, I'm going to say, something to think about for sure. Especially that ancestor of Dr. Buzzard. Some things are just meant to die. That's
deep. It's so simple, isn't it?
It is. It is. Part of me, that's what's crazy about these kind of things, is that part of me is very sad about that. Like, part of me feels that there's something to mourn there, but this other part of me is like, that's actually very beautiful. Like,
yes, of course. But you know what it is? I think that, and you're not the first person I've told the story. I noticed that people that love history, they react exactly like we reacted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, no, I literally with clawed hand to the sky, like,
right.
Information is going in the ground with this woman, and but it never dies. That's what she was trying to tell me. You know what I'm saying? If you really understand the never-ending story, yes, this is it. This is it. Don't mourn it. Move on. Create something else that's beautiful. You know what I mean? All these religions, all these spiritual paths that exist right now, they began in someone's mind. Yes, they did. They all started out with a mystic, somebody that said, you know what? Or I like that aspect of what's going on already, but I don't like that. Let's mix this up. And they're always berated, right? They're always hated. They're always hunted. The people that start these new traditions. But after a while, right? Age validates. Profits make profits. So so this is what happens. So maybe it's time for those people. I don't know. I'm just riffing now. I don't know.
I love
maybe
it.
For those people that it's not meant for them to. She asked me directly. She said, "Well, if it was all about y'all moving to New York and LA and Chicago, didn't your family continue?" Yes, ma'am. Okay, then. So obviously it was meant to die in some families and not others, or you wouldn't know anything about it. Oops. She's right.
Yeah.
She was absolutely right. She said, do you know other people whose families never stopped practicing? Yes, ma'am. Okay, then. That's just an excuse.
Right.
Because if nobody stopped doing it when people were getting lynched, and nobody stopped doing it when, it could cost you literally the farm. It could cost you everything. And people didn't stop then. You think moving your tired ass over to New York City is going to stop it? It was hilarious. I said, okay, you got me there. The logic just doesn't add up. It just was not meant for whatever reason in that line to continue. Now, again, I am not saying what people should do. If people feel like, okay, well, I heard her point on that, but I still feel like I am a root worker or whatever, do what you want to do. You know what I mean? I'm just passing along what I heard from an elder that I thought was very interesting to think about.
Definitely, 100%. Yeah, this actually segues into my next question somewhat well, and it's a big one. Is hoodoo what people could call a closed practice, as it's only available to practice if you have lineage or of Black American and or Indigenous descent? What do you think about something like that?
Again, it's a lineage-based tradition, okay? But a lot of people are doing other lineage-based traditions. I don't know any traditions that's not, okay? Most religions in the world started up, the principal or chief god of that tradition, even if it's global now, that started off as a tribal religion or a tribal spirituality. It was a tribal god, right? And through conquest or commerce, these gods traveled the world, okay? Now, that, I guess it would have to depend on the individual and how they feel about those matters, okay? I'm not a person to, get in people's way. People are grown, okay? I just don't understand what the controversy is all about at all. But at any rate, is it a closed practice? I don't know. I have no idea. Because I'm just not in the habit of telling other people what to do, because people are going to do what they want to do anyway. I say focus on what you're doing and don't worry about what other people are doing. Now, I hear a lot of stuff about appropriation and things like that.
Yeah.
And that is always my answer. People have asked me, people have written me emails about this kind of thing because they spend so much time on it. Oh my God, this is, we can't have anything. Everybody's always taking stuff from us and all this other kind of thing. That if you are a person that feels like the tradition should be guarded, then guard it. Guard it. Guard your lineage. Guard your family knowledge. Don't post about it. Don't write about it. Don't talk about it. If that's how you feel, but you can't stop other people from exploring and doing what they want to do. So I would say people, and I'd recommend anybody to research your ancestral traditions, whatever they are, whatever your ethnicity is. First of all, plants are all over the world. Okay. At the end of the day, this is planet Earth. And there are some plants that don't exist in certain regions or whatever. There's a reason for that. Okay. Research your ancestral traditions. Research the plants that your ancestors made alliances with, animals that your ancestors made alliances with. There's power in the soil where your ancestors are from. I'm more perplexed than anything, than offended. It's not in my nature, really. It's very hard to offend me anyway, because I have a dark sense of humor. But
you're a Scorpio like me, so I get it.
Oh, okay. When's your birthday?
November 14th.
Nice. I'm a Halloween baby.
Nice.
So yeah. So that's my opinion on. I think that people should, first of all, if you want to take on a tradition that is quote unquote not your own, ask yourself why you're doing it. Or do you feel that there's more potency there? Do you like the iconography? I think that there's room for reflection. That's what I would say to people, rather than just say yes or no, that it's closed. Investigate what's going on in your mind, in your spirit, because everybody's ancestors have some stuff. I know because I researched world religions and spiritual paths. Everybody has incredibly beautiful ancestors with incredibly beautiful traditions. So, I mean, if you want to practice hoodoo, who are you Who are you learning from? Baba Google? What's going on? Where are you learning? Is it on Instagram? What's going on? I just want to know what's going on. That's all I want. And
right.
You can be adopted into a lineage. It happens. And people may not want to hear it nowadays because it's not politically correct, but people have always been adopted into other communities. That has been happening. Show me the proof that it has not been the case. You even see that with 20th century anthropologists, people that they didn't know from a hole in the ground. And, they were showing some kindness or whatever. Hey, you're part of our people and you're going to be privy to our rituals or whatever. Again, it's a philosophical question that could go on for ages. If you feel that shouldn't happen, that people shouldn't adopt, other people from different tribes, aka ethnic groups or whatever, then that is just your position. But I will ask you one thing. Were any of your ancestors intertribal? Right? What's going on? And when I say tribe, I'm not only just talking about Indigenous Americans or Africans or colored people. Everybody comes from a tribe, aka an ethnic group. People need to stop and really think about these things before they make all these kind of accusations and stuff. So I just have a few questions more than anything.
I hear you. I love that that's not a complete yes or no statement. It is complicated. And I don't think that people really think too much about these things.
No, they don't. And so then it just becomes kind of, whatever the most charismatic people have to say about it. I don't have a problem with adoption of people in one's tribe. And in that, sharing spiritual information makes you part of the family as far as I'm concerned. You know what I'm saying? I don't care what it is. You see, I grew up on kung fu movies and stuff. That's also the case, right? Who's your master? Who you're part of a clan.
Right.
Okay, you're part of a clan. And in Hinduism, these are lineage-based traditions. People can erase it for their comfort, but these are all lineage. I actually put a whole post about that on Instagram as well. Like how many different traditions we no longer think of as lineage-based traditions, but absolutely are. People just ignore it because they want to participate. So it's about how you feel philosophically about these issues.
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot there, I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
But we're not living in black and white times anymore. Nothing's binary anymore, which is, I think that's a good thing, truthfully. I got to ask, you see more and more people becoming interested in hoodoo these days. What would you tell someone who perhaps wants to investigate more? Would it be just one of those things, look a bit more into your ancestry? What would you suggest to them? What would you tell them should be their first step or their first couple of steps to maybe try and figure things out about hoodoo?
Well, I'm a big fan of self-examination, Douglas. I just said that. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you want to do it? Just get to the core of why you want to do it. Is it something that seems cool? Okay. Does it seem powerful? Why? So there are a lot of different traditions. Why that one? I mean, really start with self. I think that is super important before you touch anything, before you buy a book, before you do anything, is find out. Do a little self-discovery. Okay. And if you want to find out more about it, then after that, if you really want to, learn about the foundation, then why don't you get a book about plants? Get a book about plants of the Southeast, the Southeastern United States. Okay. There are a lot of plants. Learn about those plants and what they do, how they heal. Okay. And in other ways that they are used in a esoteric context. Okay. So that's one way to go. As just a bare bones, self-examination, find out about the plants, find out about the animals, because all of these things are very, very important, or have been very, very important historically to this thing that we call hoodoo. What does this mean for you spiritually? Okay, because you can practice herbalism without calling it hoodoo, because now hoodoo is claiming a whole lot of other things, like I said, related to family and lineage and tradition and things like that. Yeah, so maybe find a friend, maybe find somebody that actually has a lineage in hoodoo and ask them, questions, try to go to the source if you can find one. Mm-hmm. Buy books. I'm a big fan of books, obviously, right? I love books. I think people should read widely and definitely read across the spectrum. I read everything. People can't believe the stuff I read. I read white supremacist websites. I was pissed when they took down a couple. I read everything, Douglas, because I learned from everything. And it's very, very important to understand opposing points of view. So read old journals. I post a lot of them. If you go to my Instagram page, I post a lot of sources. And I'm coming out with, I was telling you about this before we got on, the Hoodoo Tarot companion book is coming out, hopefully next year. And that will include a lot of resources for people. Read a lot of old academic papers. If you know somebody that's from the silent generation, they're pretty much 80 and over at this point. So you got to catch them before they go. Okay, try if you can make friends. If you work in a nursing home, talk to some old Black people there. See what they know. I mean, you may not want to bring up voodoo. They might tell you to get out of there, but there are others. There just think wide. Don't exist in an echo chamber. Do research and read history. People want to know about folklore and don't know anything about the folks, or folk magic or whatever culture. Like what? You don't know anything about the people, or you just know the greatest hits, right? Yeah. Whatever's in the media, or you learn, if you were half paying attention in school. Okay, but it's so much more. Find out about the agricultural practices here. There are so many different avenues to learn if you really are interested in learning. Now, if you're interested in just a cult of personality, there are plenty of people on social media that you can just kind of glom onto and like their word is the gospel. Right. But if you really want to be educated on any matter, you have to cast that line very, very far. And I will say that I am a very good source, okay, if for no other reason that I provide sources from so many places. I have the academic perspective. I have the, ladies' home journal, the, interesting Negro tips from there.
Right.
I have all of that stuff, and that's how I learned. I could have stopped just with my family because it's my family, and I have root workers on both sides of my family. You know what I'm saying? This is a two lineage tradition for me. On my maternal and paternal line, but yet and still, I still sought out other people and wanted to learn, if for no other reason, just to see how things were the same and how they were different. Okay, so just keep an open mind and try not to get sucked in to the cult of personality.
Yeah, I got to ask, where do you see Hoodoo going from here? Do you see it as I hate to say it, as Dr. Buzzard's progeny basically said that she wants it to end. Do you see Hoodoo just becoming more and more of a curiosity for people, or do you see it being a curiosity for people that aren't within any kind of a lineage, but the lineage stuff just slowly dying out? What do you? I'm asking you. Where do you think Hoodoo goes from here?
Well, just to clarify, she said that she was happy about it dying in her family because her family has been in service to the community for centuries. Hoodoo is not going anywhere. And it's hard to answer that question because people generally don't speak about it, especially, people just do it. It's just something that's done. It's just part of your culture. You know what I mean? Just like brushing your teeth, you're not going to write a treatise about brushing your teeth. It's something that's so natural, a ritual that is so part of your everyday life, if it is, hopefully it is, that you don't think about it. It's just part of who you are. It's part of who your family is. It's the fact that you don't throw your hair in the trash after you comb your hair. It's little things that you couldn't, you probably wouldn't even know to explain to other people. Right. You know what I mean? So I don't see it going anywhere. I don't know. You're talking about the public imagination. That's a different story. I have no idea. I see where it's going so far. It seems to be mixing with other traditions, which it's already a mixture of traditions. It has elements of different traditions, but it's heavily becoming Caribbean. That I do see. A lot of practices, as we get more people immigrating here from the Caribbean and so-called Latin America, these traditions, a lot of people that are setting up hoodoo altars, I'm looking at this stuff like, wow, this looks Catholic, this looks, foreign. Okay. So that seems to be what's happening, what I've been seeing, just scrolling through my feed. That's what I've been noticing. So I would imagine that publicly it's just going to be like this kind of mashup, even more so from the Caribbean and African elements are going to be incorporated because a lot of it is political for a lot of people. It depends. If the person is reclaiming the tradition because they're making a political point, there may be a whole lot of stuff added to it just to make that point. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, yes.
But if you're coming at it from a spiritual perspective, more so, I mean, it's hard to say. I hate to divide it up like that, but I'm just kind of talking about things that I see.
Yeah.
A spiritual perspective, you're going to focus on your family. You're going to try to, identify what mattered to your family in regards to this tradition. So root work is not going anywhere. It's going to be right where it's always been, within certain families. That's it. And as far as the public, they'll find something else to be inspired by very, very soon. We've done this so many different times. Mitch Horowitz's book was really great. I think it was called Occult America. And, North America has been through these occult trends, just when it was all the rage, back in the Victorian era, the seances were all the rage. And then people dumped it, the jazz era hit, So I would imagine that most of the people that are so hardcore or whatever, they're not even going to be around in 10 years, because it's not in their family. It's not a part, they wouldn't see it if it wasn't on it wasn't on the internet, or their favorite pop star wasn't all of a sudden, referencing these things or whatever. So that's where I see it going, to answer your question. I think a lot of it is going to drift away back into the shadows, and the ones that don't, it's just going to be more incorporated with Caribbean and the beliefs of Caribbean immigrants and African immigrants, and it's going to have more of that flavor to it.
Wonderful. The stuff that you were talking about as far as, not throwing hair in the trash, in a way, you could kind of say like root workers and root working, it's going to stay as it always has with its roots. And that's not going anywhere.
Exactly.
It's not
Right.
going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. It's just going to, it's just going to, it depends on the conversation. The family is the foundation. So if your family has a different conversation, then the root work will follow. It's like anything else. Okay. If your family takes on certain political, spiritual beliefs or whatever that wasn't in it necessarily in your bloodline or whatever, then the hoodoo will change. It's like your hair, maybe your clothes will change. Your ideology informs everything. So yeah, so that's not an issue at all. It'll be right where it's at.
Fantastic, Tayanna. This has been so much fun. I have to ask about a couple of things. So your book, Rootwork, came out 2003.
Yes.
Almost 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you say that since you've published that book, all manner of hoodoo books have like come out of the root work. All manner have come out of the woodwork is actually what I should say. But this book, I absolutely fell in love with it. Most books on hoodoo that I read, I'm not going to mention any authors. I'm not going to mention any titles or anything like that. They're a little bit, I'm just going to say, but this book is absolutely wonderful. And I hope that everybody, if they're interested in hoodoo, please pick this up. But the book that I really, really enjoyed was the one that accompanied your Hoodoo Tarot. Can I ask a couple of questions about the Hoodoo Tarot itself? Why did you decide, was it just the love of tarot and just how you live your life that you just felt like combining them? What was the impetus to try and release this wonderful, wonderful deck?
I love tarot since I was a teenager. And so I, took classes with a lady and, that began my journey in the 90s, the mid 90s, late 90s. And root work, like I said, it's always been, I don't remember a time when I didn't know, what root work was or how it informs our family, because like I said, my grandmother was great at passing down information. But yeah, it was combining the two, because I saw so many decks marketed to Black people that just didn't feel like home. The people didn't look like the people I knew or friends or family. The references were not American. They just were not, they were not hoodoo. They were not anything I recognized. And the love of both traditions, American culture, that inspired me, because there are so many decks, that are informed by different ethnicities and cultures. So I thought, why not do my own? That's where the idea came from, just to have a deck that I actually recognize myself and people were eating the foods that I eat, and saying the things and and having the experiences that I actually recognize in my ancestors and my living family members. So that was the reason why I decided to do it.
I don't want to give too much away, because I really do hope if tarot is interesting to you and if hoodoo is interesting to you, you actually have to buy this Hoodoo Tarot. Like you really, really do. I was talking with Tayanna before the mics were turned on, and I was just like, do I need another tarot deck? And it turned out, yes, I did, because the book that accompanies the deck is so wonderful. You go through some of the characters that are depicted on the cards themselves and provide further context and stories about them. It's really quite wonderful. But I also have to ask, there's something new that's going to be coming out about the Hoodoo Tarot, is there not?
Yes. So I have the Hoodoo Tarot companion book and journal. I literally just signed the contract just like 3 hours ago. So so I'm really excited, and it's a lot of the research that I couldn't, put, because it's not a history book, even though it's chock full of history. But it's at a certain point, my editor had to put his foot down and say, okay, this is enough, So now that'll be, but that's really cool information that just didn't make it in there. There will be a lot more information about the herbs. So if you're interested in herbalism, specifically herbs from the Southeast, because that's what we're working with here, that's going to be really good. You have also new spreads, exercises, in space to kind of write down your own notes and So I also have a Hoodoo Tarot crash course coming up on September 19th. Everybody is welcome to register for that. If you register before Sunday, I think you said that this is going to air on Wednesday. If you register before Sunday, which is the full moon, then you get a free gift from me. If you do that. So I have a couple of projects coming up. Yeah. So follow me on Instagram. I'm at Tayannah Lee McQuillar on Instagram. Yeah, check it out because I had pretty frequent announcements. Funny memes too. I have a sense of humor.
Your Instagram is an utter delight, and I hope that everybody listens to this. You posted something recently about the earliest depictions of Jesus and some of the apostles, and that was like I've got to look all this up now. So it's
yeah. People, I've heard from people, they treat my Instagram like a museum exhibit. If you start at the beginning, and just kind of work your way through. Some people do that. They say they take a notebook and they write down things that they need to research, because I am real big fan of suppressed history, which most of it is, suppressed, or maybe you heard the stuff, but you didn't hear it quite in the way I put it, or, with the sources that I provide. So I've really tried to expand people's minds, beyond what they learned in the classroom or what they heard on the street, because, the rabbit hole is quite deep, Douglas,
It is.
So, and I think that it can be done, and it can be done in a way that people understand. I mean, I speak academics very fluently. You don't reach the people with these kind of, dense papers, So all of my work is, is purposely not, I'm not treating people like idiots. I just want it to be accessible to people so that they can use it in a practical way, because that's also a sign of the times as well, kind of chipmunking information, because we have so much information. We're inundated with information. But how much of that information is actually practical, something that you can actually use, on a daily basis? And I also try to make my work relevant to everybody that accesses it. So I invite everybody to definitely register for the course, buy the book, check it out.
Wonderful. And I will have links to all of that in the show notes at my website, because it's got to be done. And after the Hoodoo Tarot companion book, are there any other huge projects that you can maybe even hint at, or you're going to take your time?
Wow. Yeah, I actually have a work of fiction going right now, and that's all I will say. And I also have a documentary coming out.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that I will tell you guys more about that if you follow me on Instagram.
Go to the Instagram, everybody. Go to the Instagram.
Go to the Instagram. Yeah, and I'm not on a whole lot of different platforms. That's why I'm saying that. I just got on Instagram, I think about a year and a half ago. I'm an introvert, Douglas, and so it was kind of hard for me to even just say anything, because it's not like being a writer back in the days of the 90s. You were just a writer. Now you kind of have market, and you have to be out there. It's not like before where you could just hire somebody to do all that stuff for you, and that's fine. So I've grown as a person, just kind of interacting, but maybe one day I'll get on multiple platforms. You can follow me on Facebook as well, but that's pretty much just my page just to relax, so you'll get a lot more jokes and other interesting information, because Instagram is pretty much focused on history, American history. Occasionally I'll have world history, information about root work, and that kind of thing. But I definitely try to stay on point. Astrology, I also write about that. My book, Astrology for Mystics, came out this year as well.
Right. So
I will also have a poetry book for those who are interested in that. A verse novella about P.B. Randolph, the sex magician. So I have a lot of projects, in the fire. It's just, it's just a matter of just getting down to it and doing it.
You are also a tarot counselor. Can people reach out to you to try and, or are you booked up? What's happening with the tarot consultation?
Oh yeah, I still do tarot consultations. I do ancestor readings. I do New Year's readings. I do relationship readings, career, you name it, I do it. Yes, I am booked up pretty far in advance, but if you're interested in getting, a reading done for yourself or a family member. You can also gift a reading. I know holidays are coming up and people, sometimes look for unique gifts for their friends and stuff. So that's fine. This is a good time because I'm not completely booked up for December, and January is still open if you want a New Year's kind of forecast. But people usually contact me about my ancestor readings. That's like my pride and joy. I love doing tarot in general, but I just love working with ancestors. What's very interesting about that is I noticed a trend. I received people from like 9 regions in the world, like over and over again. And last year, it was always Black Forest region in Germany. Why? I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea why. So now I'm getting a lot of people from Mexico and a lot of people of Irish descent. So it's just very, very interesting. So I can't wait to catalog this, I guess, when I'm an old lady. And, just to kind of put it all together and see what is this all about?
Get the red string and have the things on the wall, make yourself look like a conspiracy theorist.
Do that.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, so everybody is welcome. Absolutely. I just want to make sure that everybody is clear about that.
Wonderful. And do you have a webpage for that, or is it just contact via email kind of thing?
I just do this all myself. I haven't not gotten to that point. I tried to have a website and I just got bogged down.
Yeah.
I was spending so much time on that. I need an assistant. I don't know. But I do try to work hands-on with people, and I'll probably continue to function that way until I just can't anymore. But as of today, you just contact me at tlmcquillar@gmail.com. That's tlmcquillar@gmail.com for information about the courses or to book a tarot reading. I also do a mystic reading as well based on your astrology chart. And there are combinations that can be done to, lower the price a little bit. So all that information is available on Instagram. But if you want to, email me, you can do that as well.
Wonderful. Those will all be up in the show notes, so please check it out. I will have links to all the places in which you can find Tayanna's work, as well as, of course, a link to her Instagram page. Please check it out. It is a fantastic Instagram, and there's so much great information in there. And if you're a history junkie like myself, got to sign up. Give her a follow, okay? Please be sure to check out all the show notes, which are available at whatmagicisthis.com. Also, there are links to my Instagram account, my Facebook account, as well as my Twitter account. The former two I do not do very much stuff with. Just kind of links to when I release shows. But Twitter, I am fairly active on that. So please follow me, add me, block me. I don't care. Follow along. It's all good. That's available at whatmagicisthis.com as well. If you like the show, please leave a review for me either on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you can leave a review for the podcast. The star clicky thing is well and truly appreciated. But if you want to say a couple of nice words about how much you enjoy the podcast, how sexy you find my voice, because I know you do, any of those kind of things, please leave a review. If you can, people do read them, and it would be greatly appreciated. Hey, do you like the podcast? Might as well tell a friend that you like the podcast, and then hopefully they will tell another friend, and then they'll tell a friend, and then that's just how this word of mouth thing happens. That's basically, I think, the best way of trying to spread the love of What Magic Is This? So yes, if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend and then get that snowball rolling. And if you live in a place that doesn't have snow, then get that, tumbleweed rolling. I'm struggling here. But anyways, tell a friend, and then hopefully they'll tell a friend as well. Say you like the podcast a whole lot. Well, guess what? You can support the podcast by signing up to Patreon for What Magic Is This? That is available at patreon.com/whatmagicisthis. It is only $7 a month. That's it. That is all I ask. I have no other tiers. It's either you support the show or you do not. And that gives you access to exclusive content that I only have up there. I do shows about a certain grimoire. I did a show about pirates and magic. I did a show about gods and goddesses and deities. I did one about Baphomet, so if you enjoy Baphomet, you got to check that out. People are really enjoying that episode. It's unlike anything I have ever done. The reason I love my Patreon is that I get to flex my my audio muscles a little bit. I get to get a little bit experimental with the things that I do, and I also get to share more of the things that really, really interest me. So if you like the sound of that, and you also like the sound of joining a Discord server in which there's a whole bunch of my former guests, as well as a lot of really interesting people, that's available at the Patreon as well. And also you get a chance to vote on topics and upcoming content on the Patreon itself. This episode on Hoodoo was chosen by the Patreon supporters. It was so appreciated because I have really wanted to get this episode out, and thank goodness everybody chose it. But all of those things are available should you choose to support the work that I do, which I think is pretty important. And I think it's pretty good, pretty swell, if I don't say so myself. Yes, $7 a month, patreon.com/whatmagicisthis. If you do not like the whole, subscribing every month, not a fan of that, you just want to throw a couple of coins my way, then head to whatmagicisthis.com, find any one of the PayPal me buttons. The PayPal logo, hopefully. There's two P's, one's kind of over top the other P. Describing logos for people now. I'm not a corporate shill yet. Anyways, so click any one of those. You can donate $5, $10, $20, $2,000. Any amount helps. Everything that is donated through the PayPal literally goes right back into keeping this podcast operating, from hosting for the website and for the podcast itself to book supplies, research materials, and paying for my internet. Internet's not cheap, kids, especially in Canada. I don't know if you don't live in Canada, things are bad up here as far as how much it costs to have an internet or a cell phone or anything that, keeps you connected to the world. But I'll just say that. So yes, all of these things will be available at whatmagicisthis.com. So please head there for everything else. Tayanna, this has been so much fun. I would really hope that if some point in the future, if I asked you to come back on the show, you would. I've had an absolute blast. And
I did as well. I will come back whenever you ask.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That's the show, everybody. I hope you learned something. I did. Holy smokes. I got to say, I'm probably going to listen to this a couple of times myself because there's some stuff I really have to chew over. But I hope that everybody does the same and gives this one a couple of spins. That's the show, everybody. Come on back to What Magic Is This? We'll talk about this strange, weird, unbelievably crazy, but still somewhat awesome. And you love it so much, and don't even pretend that you don't. But until then, I want you all to stay healthy, stay hopeful, and stay luminous. We will talk at you soon. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Somebody done hoodoo, done hoodoo.